Hi, my name is Dylan McFarlane, and I'm giving a guest lecture for the Camborne School of Mines, University of Exeter. And the topic of this lecture is an introduction to artisanal and small-scale mining. And just a quick background, I went to the Camborne School of Mines, um, graduated in 2013 in mining engineering. And my background is as a small-scale gold miner in Alaska. So I'm going to split this lecture up into three parts. The first one is going to be a bit of an introduction in background and historical perspective to artisanal and small-scale mining, or abbreviated ASM for short. And then I'm going to discuss a few case studies. I'll talk about the conflict minerals, tin, tungsten, and tantalum, which some of you may have heard about, uh, especially mined in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as cobalt and gemstones in one section. And then in a final section, I'll talk about gold and a conclusion. So a bit of a background about Pact, the organization I work for. I just minimize this. So Pact is an international nonprofit. It's headquartered in Washington, D.C. It has about 4,000 employees spread across about 40 different country offices. Um, Pact works in health and governance, and I work within the Mines to Markets program, which mainly works with the small scale and artisanal miners. We work on health and safety, on ensuring that the mines deliver benefits to communities. That work sometimes involves some major companies like Apple or Rio Tinto, companies that source their materials from artisanal miners. And we work a lot on formalization and governance, as most of these miners aren't recognized by the governments as legal, or the process to become legal miners is so expensive and onerous that many don't have licenses. So as mining engineering or geology students at Camborne School of Mines, you will have worked and know inside and out the industrial large-scale mining sector. And of course, while that is very relevant, it ignores and misses out a really substantial part of the mining industry. So small-scale deposits are mined by artisanal miners, which might be just a single individual or a few individuals, or by small-scale mining, which has maybe a few $1 million of capex invested in it and is a little bit more professional, a little bit more mechanized. But what characterizes most artisanal and small-scale mining is very labor-intensive mining methods. But I'll repeat these key facts as we go along, but they're listed on the right. It occurs in just about every country of the world, and there's at least 40 million people directly employed, and a significant proportion of those are women. And it produces between 20 and 25% of all the world's metals and minerals. And more than that, it includes most of the world's miners, whereas the large-scale mining sector employs around 7 million people, give or take. Yeah, there's probably 10 times as many people employed in doing this manually intensive small-scale mining. So I want to give a little historical background around artisanal mining. So here's two photographs of two people doing the exact same thing. The man on the left is a prospector during the Yukon Gold Rush in North America in the late 1800s. And the woman on the right is a modern day gold miner in Western Africa. Um, the man on the left has been kind of made into somewhat of a mythical legend and hero in kind of stories and books and media portrayals, as the endeavoring individual that conquered the wild frontier and tamed these difficult lands of the Arctic. And he's symbolized in coins. He's kind of where I come from, Alaska. He's part of the symbol of our state and kind of our history and heritage. And so it's kind of look up upon as kind of this heroic, incredible individual. But the woman on the right, modern day artisanal miners, are seen as a scourge as they pollute the environment, and they cut down trees, possibly in the Amazon rainforest, to get access to these gold deposits. They use mercury and have pretty severe health impacts, and they're seen as kind of this illegal criminal problem that needs to be banished and outlawed. And so it's important that we recognize that there's actually no difference in what miners are doing today than what these gold prospectors in Australia or South Africa, or North America were doing, or even Cornish tin miners 100 years ago. And just a few images to kind of show this again. This is from Alaska, and there's hundreds of images that show kind of the impacts that what were historic small-scale and artisanal miners had on the environment. And another one from California. These miners here were using hydraulic giants, like are used up at the Imerys China Clay Works to extract kaolin China clay, but they were taking down 200-foot terraces with gold and throwing mercury directly into the stream of flowing gravel to recover the gold, and huge environmental kind of pollution from that. And yet, this was all kind of seen in a positive way. And another aspect around kind of the history of small-scale artisanal mining. This is again from the Arctic. This is the Chilkoot Pass to access the Klondike gold fields, which all the miners had to carry up about 2 tons worth of prospecting gear. An important aspect that valorizes and kind of cherishes this history, and the same could be said in Cornwall, is that these gold rushes and these artisanal mining rushes were democratizing. They brought in kind of social levelizing influence. It didn't matter if you were rich or poor. What mattered is kind of if you were endeavoring and hardworking, you could make a claim and make a stake. And so they brought a lot of infrastructure that brought a lot of political new ideas, and new strength. In South Africa, there was a huge development of a financial center, which is still Africa's biggest in Johannesburg today. And I think this quote on the right also captures this positive sentiment about small-scale miners in the past. That said, kind of in response to the Australian gold rush, that diggers came together to protest on the basis of moral economy rights, confronting the bureaucratic demands of imperial officialdom, and in doing so were seen to be advancing democratic nationalist demands. And that similar sentiment has been written about in America as well as Australia, that it had this kind of great democratizing influence. But kind of our modern notions of small-scale artisanal mining are very different to that. It's suggested that it brings about violence and strife and conflict. These images from a very famous gold rush in Brazil in the 1980s at Serra Pelada capture it. There's tens of thousands of people working around this, and it looks chaotic. You see this famous image on the bottom right of a miner holding a a military official's gun, and yeah, there's been yeah, a lot of kind of imagination kind of about how chaotic and how terrible artisanal mining is based on these images. And although it looks very chaotic and dangerous, um, in fact, this was an incredibly organized and efficient operation. Um, Now, not many people made vast sums of money. There were some millionaires made, um, but it was very organized, and there was quite strong law and order kind of amongst the miners. And then this is a modern image that's kind of repeated in most artisanal and small-scale gold mining. Features images like this from Western Africa, which shows a small group of miners. There's a pit, a shallow um, tunnel there behind, using just rope and piece of wood for a windlass to bring men and ore up and down, and quite yeah, challenging and dangerous conditions. So who cares about ASM and why? I'm going to just present a few basic facts and figures about the sector. So we know that there are at least 40 million miners that directly work in the sector, uh, and we estimate that there's um, probably more than 4 dependents for each of those miners. So the number of people involved and that are dependent on the sector are incredible. And it's been said that ASM is the most important, indispensable economic activity in rural sub-Saharan Africa. Um, Miners can mine permanent, full-time, year-round, or sometimes seasonally. They often mine and pursue agriculture side by side, or maybe during different seasons, or they mine when they need a little bit of extra income. Many miners um, will mine to supplement education fees, or when some other cash is needed for something. And yeah, as I said before, the amount of minerals that are produced is quite staggering. So 20% of gold and diamonds are produced by ASM, and about 80% of gemstones, and the majority of aggregates and industrial rocks and minerals, so sand, gravel, limestone. Most of this is produced by ASM in most of the world's developing countries. And there's a map there that shows some of the countries with the largest populations of ASM. So you see Brazil, the DRC, China and India, of course, and several other countries in sub-Saharan Africa have very large populations of ASM. And ASM are huge contributors to the economy. Pact completed a study several years ago, and we could update these numbers with some newer figures to demonstrate how important they are to the economy. And although this shows, yeah, that LSM is producing 428,000 ounces versus 311 from ASM, it's reversed in the last few years, so that currently in Zimbabwe, about 2/3 of gold production is produced by ASM. And this is hugely significant for a country like Zimbabwe with their economic situation. It is the ASM sector that keeps their economy afloat and allows them foreign currency to buy and import medicines and diesel and foodstuffs. And so, yeah, it's hugely significant to the economy and to the population. And another example there on the bottom is from Tanzania, from official gold production figures in 2015, showing that again the artisanal sector outproduced the large-scale sector by a significant margin. And instead of producing instead of providing employment to just 50,000 people, which the industrial sector did, employment was provided to almost 1 million people. And here are just a few more figures and examples from Gavin Hilson, who is a professor at the University of Surrey and a very important ASM author, showing a few different figures about the economic contribution. So on the top right, $811 million were contributed into Mongolia's economy from ASM, and $505 million of those dollars were in local economies. And on the bottom there, Uganda, miners contribute 20 times more to GDP than those employed in farming, fishing, and forestry. So ASM is being seen as a way to combat poverty and achieve the sustainable development goals around the world. And slowly, governments are beginning to pay attention, as well as large-scale mining companies. And just one more figure from Delve, which is a platform Pact runs with the World Bank around data on artisanal small-scale mining, trying to estimate the total value of mineral productions every year, and that is almost around $190 billion, mainly from development minerals, which is a catchphrase for those industrial rocks and minerals like sand and gravel and gypsum, and phosphate, and all those important things that are locally derived for local economies. But then other large sectors are gold and tin and gemstones. And so from a development perspective, this graphic comes from the International Council of Mining and Metals, which represents the large-scale mining companies, to demonstrate to countries in Africa and Asia why mining is a positive influence. And so they talk about that it provides a lot of foreign direct investment, which is true. Large-scale mining projects bring in billions of dollars of capital, and they can be quite significant exporters. If you look at countries like Guinea or Australia with iron ore or copper out of Zambia and Chile, they can be quite important for government revenue and exports. But then going down that upside down pyramid, large-scale mining does provide some national income, but it usually employs maybe 1%, if that, of the total labor force. And there's still quite a lot of expats that go to parts of Africa and Asia because training and education for mining, engineering, and mineral processing isn't so good. But the ASM sector, if we look at its developmental impacts, is the reverse of this. So ASM doesn't provide a huge amount of foreign direct investment. Most of these mines, can start up with as little as $500 or $1,000, or maybe up to $1 million if it's more of a mechanized mine. So there's not large sums of money coming into the country. They can provide some significant taxes, but going down that list, some countries earn huge amounts of exports and income. I'm thinking of Zimbabwe, of DRC, Cote d'Ivoire, and then employment and livelihoods. As I've kind of reiterated that point again and again, it's a huge provider of jobs and income in rural areas where the only other alternatives are farming and fishing or forestry, which can be quite difficult livelihoods. This is the Delve platform on ASM data that I mentioned earlier. So you can look up the website there and get some more updated numbers and figures and reports. And just a few more slides to wrap up this section on what constitutes a artisanal miner. Unlike LSM, the large-scale mining sector, which has kind of a stereotypical image of a big man driving a truck and or the mining engineer doing the CAD plans. Artisanal miners are young, are old, are men, are women, occur everywhere. There's no one stereotype of what a artisanal miner might look like. And to kind of combat this idea that it's chaotic and unorganized, here are kind of three basic ways that ASM sites are organized. The first is kind of this classic view of a cooperative, of a group of, in this case, 5 miners that all mine in a shallow pit. They share all the profit and the losses, and they kind of all work together as a team. Another one on the right is a little bit more organized in what we think of as a modern mining company. The miners might still all work together and share profits, but they need a little bit of capital, maybe in the way of pumps or compressors and tools, which might be provided by a lead miner or claim owner, possibly with the help of a financier, and sometimes with security. And then in a little bit more sophisticated way, there's companies which have much more organized structures. And there are lots of challenges within the sector. The first one being health and safety. These mines are not conducting geotechnical risk evaluations, and there's a huge number of safety hazards and health issues, from silicosis to mercury poisoning, that need to be addressed. And there are, can be quite significant environmental and social issues. We deal a lot with trying to remove children out of small-scale mines, and there's a lot of associated conflict and violence that has been observed in ASM sites that we also work to reduce and eliminate. One of the major challenges, however, is this idea of kind of legal access and recognition or formalization. Artisanal miners don't have the training and background like professional and large-scale mining companies do. And because of that, they don't have access to geological data to know where they should be going to mine. They just kind of rely on, word of mouth and hearsay. And they don't have access to land, or not the most prospective land. Another problem is the feasibility of these deposits, because miners are often relegated to marginal and low-grade small deposits which are discontinuous. They have a hard time making these mines profitable, and the profit margins are usually very, very thin. And technological challenges. These miners are using kind of equipment and methods, which are quite antiquated, and without very much training or knowledge, and certainly very limited or non-existent access to capital. So they struggle to make these mines efficient and working under optimal conditions. Here's a brief snapshot looking at ASM fatalities that were reported in the media over about a 1-year period. And we've done quite a bit of work to kind of look at, what are the main causes of fatalities, and most of those are to do with geotechnical issues, mainly landslides above ground and falls of ground underground. And oftentimes those two are combined, where open pits are then started to be mined underground, and the two can combine. So yeah, there was some quite significant disasters that occurred in 2019. The one in April there was a landslide in the DRC that buried 54 people at a cobalt operation. And yeah, there it is again. Gold is the most often commodity where fatalities have been reported. And here's an example of what some of these mines might look like, and kind of the health and safety challenges. These are tin and tantalum mines in Rwanda. And this is a cooperative of about 400 workers, and you can see timbering is being used there, but is yeah, a bit haphazard in some places. You see in the bottom middle, there's yeah, very limited headroom. All across these, there's very limited headroom, um, and one of these mines on the bottom left had quite um, well supported timbering as well as electric lights, and this was a project to try and yeah, improve all these mines to that standard. And this is a manual that we developed on yeah, occupational health and safety curriculum for miners in the DRC. And just a final slide to conclude. From kind of these challenges, despite all these, I want to just kind of return to this historical notion, you know, that miners are using these old methods and, you know, are not very efficient or intelligent, and say that small-scale miners invented large-scale mining. So there's this image from the top left from Agricola, written in 1500s, about, you know, German small-scale miners sluicing gold in a stream. And there's an image on the top there of Peruvian miners mining underground and using an old truck to use for haulage. And it's an ingenious, low-cost method to, yeah, bring ore up safely. And on the bottom left is another example from Peru of small-scale miners that developed gold farms, where they put these slates from roads kind of pointed uphill, because they discovered every year the spring floods eroded deposits that had gold, and would deposit gold within the crevices. And so they did this, and it was kind of like a renewable farming gold resource. Incredibly ingenious. And yeah, the last one, there's on the bottom right, in northern Spain at Les Medulas, you can see kind of ancient Roman small-scale mining techniques, which developed what is now kind of, you know, known as block cave mining, an incredibly clever engineering feat, where they would tunnel a network of horizontal and vertical shafts and adits, and then run a huge amount of water through that to make the entire mountain collapse, so that they could bulk mine a resource, you know, of several hundred meters thick gold-bearing alluvium, and then process it using sluice boxes. And so, yeah, I just want to keep a perspective change that although mining by artisanal miners is beset with a lot of challenges, there are a lot of innovative men and women out there, you know, developing new ways of mining and processing, and that they're actually very, very efficient with the tools and equipment and money that they have. And low carbon. They don't use big trucks and shovels, and so you know, in a future world where CO2 is you know, a traded commodity, they're going to be valued more, I predict. So that concludes the first section, and I'll join you here in a little bit for one of the first case studies.